Hey everyone! Tonight we're stepping into a Viking dawn so cold that even your eyelashes might freeze together. The kind of cold where your breath doesn't just fog up, it crystallises mid-air and falls like glittering dust. You're standing somewhere in 9th century Scandinavia, in a settlement wedged between ice-choked fjords and forests of spruce. No central heating, no cosy fireplace, not even a decent pair of socks by modern standards. Just the kind of chill that makes you question all your life choices, like why you didn't just stay in bed in the 21st century. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're trying to stay warm tonight. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft background music, and let's get started tonight. You wake to the sound of ravens outside, their wings slicing the air sharper than any blade. Inside your turf-roofed hut, the air is cold enough to make your teeth ache. You pull your wool blanket tighter, though blanket might be too generous a word. It's more like a slightly less scratchy rug. There's no glowing hearth in sight, no pile of burning logs to stretch your hands toward. Just the faint glow of embers buried in ash breathing out the last sighs of yesterday's warmth. You shuffle across the packed earth floor, your feet numb within wool wrappings that pass for socks. You could try to light a fire, sure, but wood's precious this far north. It's a luxury, saved for cooking or ceremonies, not casual comfort. The Vikings didn't live soft lives. Warmth was a privilege they engineered from every material, habit and instinct available. Outside, the world is a landscape of ice and blue light. The air has that metallic taste that comes only when everything is frozen solid. Your nose starts running instantly. Congratulations, you're alive. A few steps away, you see a Viking woman shaking snow off animal pelts strung along a line. She's wearing layers of wool and linen, each carefully chosen not for fashion but function. Her boots are stuffed with straw, yes, straw to keep her feet dry and insulated. You make a mental note, ancient IKEA hacks, 0 electricity required. As you watch, your body starts doing what it always does in the cold, it tightens up. Muscles stiffen, blood slows. You can almost hear your own body whisper, please find heat. And that's exactly what the Vikings learned to do, not through comfort, but through sheer creativity. They built their warmth from the ground up, literally. Under your feet lies the secret. The packed earth inside their homes wasn't just dirt. It was layered and tamped to trap what little warmth existed. Some families even covered the floor with rushes, moss, or animal hides, changed regularly to keep things dry. Moisture was the real enemy. Wet meant cold and cold meant death. Vikings knew this intuitively, even if they couldn't explain it with thermodynamics. You step outside again, breath pluming in the dim light. The fjord gleams like polished steel, and smoke rises from nearby roofs. Not thick smoke, but thin wisps, because full fires were rare. They used embers, coals, and clever airflow to heat specific spots rather than entire rooms. Efficiency, centuries before the concept, was trendy. You head toward the livestock pen, drawn by the soft grunts and huffs of sheep and cows. The animals are half buried in straw, cosy in their own body heat. You can feel the temperature rise a few degrees just by stepping near them. This wasn't just farming, it was a strategy. Viking houses often shared walls with animal stalls, letting heat from the herd radiate inward. Primitive, maybe. Brilliant, definitely. One of the men nearby grins at your shivering. He says something you don't understand, probably laughing at your fancy modern posture. He points to his feet, bare, cracked, tough as cured leather. You realise he's not showing off. He's reminding you, warmth starts at the ground. Keep it dry, keep it layered, and keep moving. That's Viking wisdom in a nutshell. As the wind shifts, it carries a faint smoky aroma, burnt peat mixed with fish oil. Vikings used whatever they could find to generate heat. Peat from bogs, driftwood from the sea, even whale blubber when they could get it. Nothing went to waste. If it could burn or smoulder, it had a purpose. Some historians still debate whether they used banked fires, buried embers under ash to last through the night, or simply relied on thick insulation and shared sleeping. Either way, the result was the same: survival without waste. The sun rises lazily, just skimming the horizon. You squint at its pale disk and realise it gives off almost no warmth at all. Light without heat. That's the Viking winter in a sentence. Yet somehow they thrived. They carved out comfort not from abundance but from adaptation. Every layer of wool, every trick of architecture, every communal habit was an answer to the same eternal question. How do you keep living when the world wants you frozen? You rub your hands together, trying to chase the feeling back into your fingers. It doesn't help much. You stomp your feet and laugh at yourself, a weird, half-delirious chuckle, because really, you're standing in a world that made hypothermia a lifestyle, and yet they called this home. Somewhere in the distance you hear the faint clang of metal on metal. Maybe a blacksmith at work, shaping iron before the forge cools. The heat from his fire would be precious, rationed carefully. Maybe you could edge closer, sneak a little warmth, but that's not the Viking way. Here, everyone earns their comfort through effort, not luck. You pull your cloak tighter and look toward the longhouse, the heart of the settlement. You can almost see faint curls of smoke rising through a hole in the roof. Maybe that's where the real secrets lie, not just in what the Vikings wore, but in where they lived, how they built, and how they turned cold itself into an ally. Your breath fogs again, a tiny ghost in the frigid air. You take one last look at the frost-covered fields and step toward the doorway, ready to see what warmth really meant to them. You duck into the longhouse and instantly the world changes. The wind cuts off, the light dimmed, and the air feels, well, not warm exactly, but less cold. You're standing in a space built not just for living, but for enduring. Every inch of it is a thermal strategy dressed up as daily life. You can smell wool, smoke, and the faint tang of dried fish hanging from the rafters like icicles of protein. A Viking woman nods at you as she adjusts her outer layer. A cloak made from thick sheep's wool, draped with the confidence of someone who's been surviving winters since birth. You can tell immediately, this isn't just clothing. This is armour against the elements. Wool, fur, linen, repeat, each layer doing its job in the ancient science of insulation. You try to imitate her look, but you feel like a kid playing dress-up. The inner tunic scratches against your neck, the wool cloak smells faintly of wet dog, and your fur collar keeps sneezing stray hairs into your face. But you can feel it working, the layers trap air, that invisible blanket between fabric and skin. You realise the Vikings knew something most modern people have forgotten. Warmth isn't about the thickness of what you wear, it's about how air gets trapped inside it. A man nearby tightens a belt around his tunic, pulling the layers snug. The belt doesn't just hold a knife, it locks the heat closer to the body. He catches your eye and grins, tapping the iron brooch that pins his cloak. It's not decoration, it's thermodynamics disguised as jewellery. And the fur? Reindeer maybe, or fox. Either way, it's been brushed, smoked and treated to keep out moisture. You can almost hear it whisper in windproof since 793 AD. There's a low hum in the room, a mix of conversation, coughing and crackling embers. You realise that warmth here comes in layers too, from skin, from wool, from shared breath. There's no roaring fire, no dramatic blaze, just coals, smouldering in a central pit, their glow flickering like tired stars. The air's smoky, but it's doing something clever. Heat rises, then gets trapped under the thatched roof before escaping through a small vent. The whole structure is one big, breathing lung of survival. Historians still debate whether Viking clothing was purely practical, or if it also carried social meaning, status woven right into the fabric. The finer the weave, the higher you're standing. You can almost imagine a Viking fashion critic murmuring, "Ah yes, his cloak is spun from imported Icelandic wool, very prestigious, very warm." Outside, a gust of wind rattles the turf walls, and you flinch instinctively. But the woman beside you just shrugs. She seems to say with her eyes. The walls are layered too, timber frames stuffed with moss and turf trapping every bit of warmth. Even the smoke has a purpose, drifts through the rafters, coating the beams with soot, which helps waterproof the structure over time. See, even pollution worked in their favour. You pull your cloak tighter, trying to appreciate the genius of it all. Wool was their miracle material. It insulates even when wet, something modern synthetics still brag about. The Vikings raised sheep with long, coarse outer hairs and fine, soft undercoats. 2 types of fibre in one animal. The outer layer repelled water, the inner one held warmth. When spun together, it made a fabric that could face down the North Sea and still come out smug. There's a moment where you almost forget how cold you are. The rhythm of life in this longhouse feels ancient and efficient. A woman spins thread by the glow of the coals, her spindle whirring like a sleepy wasp. Kids wrestle in the corner, wrapped in miniature cloaks. A man repairs a net, humming a tune that sounds older than the language itself. Warmth isn't just temperature, it's motion, noise, shared space. You crouch beside the hearth, holding your hands over the coals. The heat's faint but steady. You notice how everyone keeps their sleeves long, even when working. The wrists and ankles, those are the danger zones. If you lose warmth there, it leaks from everywhere. You can almost hear a Viking version of your mum saying, "Cover your wrists or you'll catch cold." Some advice never dies, it just changes accent. One man tosses a bit of dried moss into the coals and it releases a puff of herbal scent. You realise it's not just fuel, it's insulation, it's medicine, it's everything. Vikings used moss as stuffing in boots, as wound dressing, even as primitive diapers for babies. It's the kind of multitasking that makes modern minimalists look lazy. You adjust your cloak again, realising how carefully it's cut. The shape isn't random, it's wide enough to wrap fully around your body, but short enough to move in. The pin on your shoulder doesn't just fasten it, it channels rain away from your chest. You can imagine warriors pinning their cloaks on the right side to keep their sword arm free. Design meets survival, ancient ergonomic fashion. A kid laughs as you stumble slightly, your boots slipping on the earthen floor. He points at your feet, where a straw peeks out from under the bindings. Vikings often stuffed straw or hay into shoes for insulation, changing it daily like socks. It sounds absurd until you realise it works. Nature's own thermal padding, biodegradable and free. Take that high-tech footwear. One of the elders mutters something that sounds like a prayer, though it might just be a complaint about the draft. The smoke from the hearth curls upward, catching the light like a ghost. You imagine nights like this stretching on for months. Dark, cold, endless. And yet the people here don't look defeated. They look adapted. Like warmth isn't something they chase, it's something they wear, something they build into their bones. Historians still debate whether the Vikings had specific winter festivals dedicated to warmth, but evidence suggests gatherings centred on fire, feasting and shared storytelling. Maybe that's why they survived, not just through insulation but through community. The warmth of human connection, literally and figuratively. You feel your body start to relax finally. The layers, the shared air, the rhythm of the space. It all works together like a living machine. You think about how much of modern warmth depends on switches and systems, while theirs came from understanding nature itself. The smell of wool, the sound of quiet laughter, the faint pulse of coals, it's all deeply human. You breathe in, feeling the warmth gather under your layers, and you can't help but smile. For the first time tonight, you're not shivering. You're surviving, Viking style. You push aside the heavy wool curtain that separates one end of the longhouse from the other, and a wave of smoky heat rolls past you like a living thing. It's not the kind of heat you'd get from a roaring fire. It's softer, thicker, almost animal. It clings to your clothes, seeps into your bones, and smells faintly of meat and pine sap. This, you realise, is the Viking version of climate control. The longhouse itself is massive, stretching 30 paces end to end, its wooden ribs arched like the hull of an inverted ship. You can see how everything in it was designed to conserve warmth. The walls are packed with turf, the roof insulated with moss and straw, and the narrow doorway you just came through is angled to block the wind. Even the floor slopes slightly toward the centre pit, guiding heat where people sit, sleep and eat. It's not random, it's physics, Viking style. The hearth at the centre isn't a fireplace in the modern sense. There's no chimney, no fancy stonework, just a shallow pit lined with stones, glowing like buried Sims. The heat radiates slowly upward, then slides along the roof beams, trapped under the low ceiling before escaping through a tiny smoke vent. It's like living inside a giant wooden thermos. You crouch beside the pit and your eyes sting from the smoke. It's thick enough to make you cough, but you notice something strange. No one else is bothered. They're used to it. The smoke not only helps preserve meat hanging above the fire, It also drives away insects and, ironically, helps seal cracks in the roof as soot builds up. The Vikings turned discomfort into utility. You, on the other hand, just look like you lost a fight with a barbecue. A woman beside you pokes at the coals with an iron rod, adding a few pieces of driftwood that hiss as they burn. She doesn't waste a single log. Firewood's too precious for that. Instead, she adjusts airflow by shifting stones, an ancient heat regulation system. You can feel the temperature rise just slightly, the smoke thinning as the embers flare. You mutter something about ancient thermostats under your breath, earning a confused but amused glance. The air grows warmer toward the centre of the house, cooler by the walls. It's a microclimate, zones of heat that people navigate instinctively. The elderly sit closest to the fire, children curl up in the middle, and warriors or workers take the outer benches wrapped in cloaks. Heat becomes a kind of social map. Where you sit says something about your role, your endurance, your place in the tribe. Historians still debate whether Viking longhouses had permanent hearths or if the fires were moved depending on the season. Some evidence suggests that in summer they'd shift the heat source to one side to vent better, while in winter it stayed central to radiate evenly. It's another reminder that nothing here was casual. Everything was tested by time, by cold, by necessity. You sit down, feeling the bench creak beneath you. The wood is warm, almost toasty, and you realise why. Beneath it, flat stones have been arranged to absorb and reflect heat from the fire. A natural heat battery, centuries before the phrase existed. You press your hand against one. It's like a Viking seat warmer. Someone ladles stew from a cauldron hanging above the coals, and the smell makes your stomach growl. Meat, onions, maybe some turnip. You accept a bowl and notice how the ceramic feels, thick-walled, holding onto warmth like a secret. Eating hot food in a cold world wasn't just comfort, it was strategy. Calories meant heat, and warmth meant survival. You take a sip and immediately scald your tongue. Congratulations, you've achieved historical authenticity. You look up at the ceiling, blackened with soot but dotted with tiny openings where light filters through. Smoke swirls in lazy currents, painting invisible paths through the beams. You imagine the hundreds of nights spent here. Stories told, songs sung, snowstorms raging outside while the coals glow like hearts that refuse to go out. There's a rhythm to this space. The low ceiling keeps the warmth close, the thick walls mute the wind, and even the animal stalls at one end contribute to the heat. The cows huff softly, their breath adding humidity to the air. You realise the Vikings weren't just living with nature, they were building into it. The longhouse breathes like a creature, exhaling warmth, inhaling smoke, surviving by design. A man stands near the fire and gestures toward the roof vent, a tiny square opening where smoke curls out into the freezing sky. He seems proud of it, as if it's a badge of innovation. And it is. Without it, they'd suffocate. With it, they lose just enough heat to survive. The balance is delicate, constant, learned through centuries of trial and frostbite. You think about your modern home, insulated walls, double glazing, heating vents, thermostats that argue with you. The Vikings had none of that, yet they mastered thermal balance through intuition. It's humbling. You take another sip of stew and imagine what it took to survive a winter where daylight might last only a few hours. One of the children near the wall sneezes, and his mother wraps him tighter in a blanket. The wool is coarse but soft with use, smelling faintly of lanolin and smoke. You can almost feel the warmth trapped between fear, the slow exhale of sheep long gone but still protecting the living. That's the poetry of Viking life. Every comfort comes with a cost, but nothing is wasted. Outside, the wind howls against the turf roof, but inside it sounds distant, like the world is pressing its face to the window, jealous of the heat it can't steal. You lean back, close your eyes, and listen to the crackle of coals, the shuffle of boots, the low hum of voices. It's a chorus of survival, sung in the key of necessity. Historians still debate whether the longhouse was purely domestic or also ceremonial, a blend of home and hall, of hearth and myth. Standing here, you think it might be both. Fire wasn't just heat, it was presence, proof that life still flickered in a world of frost. As the coals settle into a deeper glow, the smoke thins, and the air feels almost gentle. You stretch your hands, no longer numb, and watch how the light dances across the beams. Somewhere a dog sighs in its sleep, and you realise the irony. In a land of ice, the Vikings built their own pocket of summer. Not through luxury, but through understanding. You take one last sip of stew, set the bowl aside and glance toward the sleeping area, where shadows promise the next secret of Viking warmth, the kind that comes not from fire, but from each other. You follow the sound of soft breathing and low murmurs toward the far end of the longhouse, where the light from the central hearth fades into a warmer, darker hush. It smells of hay, wool, and the faint musk of animals. The air feels thicker here, humid from breath and life layered with a kind of warmth that no fire can make. You realise quickly this is where the Vikings really beat the cold. You step over a sleeping dog and almost trip on a bundle of fur. Except it's not a bundle. It's a kid, maybe 6 years old, wrapped so completely in a reindeer hide that only a tuft of hair sticks out. He's asleep beside a goat and both are steaming gently in the cold air. The goat snorts, unimpressed by your intrusion. You mumble an apology to both species. Sleeping with livestock isn't some weird superstition. It's thermodynamics in action. In many Viking longhouses, the living quarters and animal stalls shared the same roof. The heat from cows, sheep and goats would rise and linger, turning the whole room into a living furnace. A cow can generate the same heat as a small space heater, though with worse sound effects. You tuck that fact away, wondering if modern eco-architects are missing a trick. You edge toward a wooden platform lined with furs. It's not exactly a bed, more like a communal nest. The benches double as sleeping spaces, stuffed with straw or moss for insulation. Vikings didn't sleep alone. They huddled, layered like a human lasagna of body heat and wool. Husbands, wives, children, even servants sometimes shared the same pile. Privacy was a summer luxury. Warmth was winter law. You sit down and feel the straw crunch beneath you. It's surprisingly comfortable, springy, dry and warm from the trapped air. You pull a fur over your shoulders and understand immediately why they used animal hides. They hold warmth like a memory. You can feel the ghost of the creature's life still radiating through the fibres. It's not creepy, it's comforting, primal, like sharing a heartbeat with history. A woman beside you smiles and offers a bit of dried meat. You take it, chewing slowly while she pulls her sleeping baby closer. The child's wrapped in wool and linen, layers upon layers, only a tiny face visible. You notice she places the baby between herself and another adult, not at the edge. That's another trick. The warmest spot in the pile goes to the most fragile. Even in the Dark Ages, they had their version of smart parenting. You lie back for a moment, letting your body adjust. The warmth creeps in slowly, like honey spreading across cold bread. You can hear breathing all around you, steady, rhythmic, synchronized like the tide. This isn't just rest, it's survival choreography. Historians still debate whether Vikings used separate sleeping rooms or curtained-off alcoves. Some remains suggest partitioned spaces for higher status families, while others show fully open layouts. Either way, one thing's clear. They didn't waste heat on walls. Every shared breath mattered. Every degree of warmth was communal property. Someone shifts beside you, and the furs rustle. You notice how they layer them. Heavier hides like reindeer or bear on top, lighter ones below. It's insulation strategy 101. Air gets trapped between each layer, keeping the warmth in. You're basically inside a medieval weighted blanket, minus the anxiety about shipping delays. Outside, the wind picks up, a low whistle against the turf walls. You can hear it, but you can't feel it. The longhouse holds steady. The walls flex slightly with the gusts, absorbing the pressure instead of cracking. It's an old trick. Turf buildings are alive in their own way, bending where stone would break. You can almost imagine the Vikings laughing at later stone castles. Pretty, sure, but freezing. A man enters with an armful of hay, brushing snow off his shoulders. He spreads it across the floor for the animals, and they murmur in contentment. The heat from their bodies thickens the air again. It's weirdly soothing, like being inside a living engine that runs on hay and habit. You're half tempted to pet a cow and whisper, "Thanks for the central heating, buddy." The conversation around you fades to murmurs. Someone snores softly. Someone else hums a lullaby. Low, almost monotone, like the rhythm of the sea. The words are lost, but the tone feels ancient, protective. You close your eyes and let the sound settle into your bones. Then, a shift. The baby starts to fuss. The mother rocks gently, whispering something you can't understand, but the cadence is unmistakable. It's the universal shh of humanity. You feel an odd tenderness, realizing this exact sound has echoed through every generation since. Fire or no fire, that's what warmth really sounds like. Your mind drifts as you study the ceiling beams, blackened and rough. A few holes let in faint starlight. The smoke from the central hearth curls upward and vanishes through them. But down here, the air's still thick with life. It's warm enough that you can almost forget the ice beyond the door. Almost. You imagine what it would have been like during the worst winters, the kind where snow buried doors and ice crept across the walls. You'd stay here shoulder to shoulder, days at a time, barely moving. Time would dissolve into the rhythm of breathing, eating, dozing. It sounds claustrophobic to you, but to them, it was security. Historians still debate whether Vikings preferred sleeping upright or lying flat. Some sagas describe warriors half sitting in bed to stay alert. Maybe they were ready to leap up at any sound, maybe they were just trying to keep their noses out of the smoke. Either way, sleep was survival, not luxury. You turn slightly and notice the floor beneath the straw is warmer than you expected. Someone must have buried heated stones from the hearth beneath it. A trick you saw earlier with the benches. It radiates upward like a secret hand, keeping the space temperate long after the fire dies. You whisper to yourself, geothermal heating Viking edition. Someone stirs beside you, muttering in their sleep, and the whole pile of furs shifts slightly, adjusting automatically like a living thing. It's intimate, human, timeless. You suddenly understand, in this world warmth isn't something you chase, it's something you share. You let your eyes close for a moment, listening to the wind fade outside and the low hum of breathing around you. If you could bottle this, the sound, the smell, the heat, you'd have the most ancient sleep aid in history. You smile, halfway between waking and dreaming, and drift in that strange middle place where you could almost forget how cold the world really is. When you wake, the light filtering through the smoke holes is thin and blue like the world outside is frozen mid-breath. The coals in the hearth have dulled to a sleepy orange glow, but the smell in the air pulls you up faster than any alarm clock. Meat stew, fish broth, and something sweet. Maybe honey. Breakfast, Viking edition. You shuffle toward the centre of the longhouse, tugging your wool cloak tight, and immediately catch sight of the morning ritual, the tending of the coals. A man crouches by the hearth, gently blowing on the ash pile like it's a secret he's coaxing back to life. Tiny sparks flare and vanish until one finally catches, and the fire's faint breath fills the room again. No flint, no match, just patience, dried moss and lung power. They call it banking the fire. Every night the Vikings buried their coals in ash to keep them alive till morning. It's a low-tech miracle. Embers can smoulder for 12 hours if insulated right. That way you never truly start from scratch. It's the Viking version of keeping the Wi-Fi on overnight. Historians still debate how consistent this method was, but the evidence, charred pits, ash layers and burn marks, suggests they mastered it. As the fire grows, the room's energy shifts. People stir, stretching like cats. Someone ladles out thick stew from an iron cauldron, steam twisting upward like ghostly ribbons. You accept a bowl and it's instantly too hot to hold, which is the best kind of problem. You sit cross-legged on a fur mat, bowl in hand, feeling heat radiate through the ceramic. It's not just food, it's heat transfer, calories wrapped in comfort. Vikings ate heavy in the cold, fatty meats, porridge, mead, root vegetables. The stew's rich, made from lamb, onions, and something grainy. Barley, maybe. You sip, and your whole chest warms from the inside out. The first real heat of the day isn't from the fire, it's from digestion. A woman next to you drops a few smooth stones into the coals, waits, then scoops them out with tongs and lowers them into a wooden bucket of water. Steam hisses up, fragrant with herbs. She dips a cloth in the water and presses it to her neck, sighing. Instant heat therapy, 10th century edition. You copy her, awkwardly. It works. Your fingers thaw and you feel like you've unlocked a cheat code for surviving winter. You glance around and realise everyone's multitasking with heat. A man warms his boots over a stone. A child cradles a hot rock like a teddy bear. Someone's even steaming wool garments near the coals, softening them. Fire wasn't just about cooking or light, it was a resource. divided and rationed carefully. You get a sudden respect for their efficiency. No wasted warmth, no wasted energy. Outside, a door flap opens and a gust of icy air slashes through the longhouse. Instantly, everyone curses, or the Viking equivalent of cursing. The person at the door quickly seals it again, muttering what sounds like an apology. The cold is treated here like an intruder. You can almost imagine the Norse gods themselves glaring from the snow, jealous of the comfort within. You spoon up the last of your stew and notice a few people dipping bread in theirs. The bread's dense, heavy, probably rye or barley. It's perfect for soaking up every drop. Food wasn't just nourishment, it was insulation. Fat and carbs kept the body burning hotter, longer. You think about how modern diets chase low-fat this and keto that, and you laugh. The Vikings would have called that a good way to die fast. Someone nearby raises a horn of mead, golden and glowing in the dim light. You take a sip when it's offered, and the sweetness spreads through you like sunlight. Mead wasn't just for parties, it was liquid warmth, calories in disguise. The honey in it provided quick energy, and the alcohol helped dull the edge of the cold. Of course, too much mead and you'd forget where your boots were, which was bad survival strategy, moderation, Viking style. Historians still debate the daily role of alcohol in Norse life, whether it was ceremonial or just practical hydration in places where water froze half the year. Whatever the truth, the warmth that gives your chest feels timeless. You take another sip, purely for historical accuracy. The woman with the bucket of hot stones hands you one. "Hold," she says simply, and you do. The stone fits your palm perfectly, radiating gentle heat. You wonder how many nights, how many winters, this same trick has passed from hand to hand. It's not invention, it's inheritance. Then you see something stranger still. A young man scooping ashes into a small clay bowl. He mixes them with the water into a grey paste, then smears it along the hearth wall. At first, you think he's redecorating badly, but then you notice it's insulation. The ash seals cracks, keeps them out drafts, even reflects heat. Vikings literally painted warmth into their homes. Some historians believe ash coatings even reduce smoke staining, though opinions differ. Either way, it's genius. The longhouse feels different now, awake, pulsing with quiet warmth. The animals stir in their stalls, the children giggle, and the older men argue softly over whether to risk sailing before the thaw. You lean back, soaking in the sound, the smell, the calm rhythm of life built around heat. And then, just when you think you've seen every trick, they bring out the stones again. Only this time they drop them into a sealed wooden box buried in straw. You peek inside later and realise what it is, a makeshift oven. The stones stay hot for hours, slow cooking whatever's inside. Viking sous vide. You grin at the thought. Gordon Ramsay would be proud. Someone slides a slab of fish wrapped in leaves from the coals. The aroma fills the air, smoky sweet, a little salty. They share it around and you bite into it, steam puffing out like the breath of the sea itself. It's delicious, but more than that, it's warm. Every bite feels like a small fire you can carry inside. You glance toward the roof where smoke drifts lazily upward again. The vent hole glows faintly with daylight. You think about how these people built a whole culture on such delicate balances. Heat and smoke, food and flame, endurance and ease. Everything was a negotiation with nature, and somehow they always managed to win just enough to live another day. You set your bowl down, wipe your hands and stretch. The warmth lingers, wrapping around you like a promise. Outside, snow still falls. Inside, you're full, flushed and faintly drowsy. Maybe it's the mead, or maybe it's the fact that for the first time all night you actually feel cozy. You smile, half amused at the absurdity of it all. Vikings didn't just survive without fireplaces, they turned survival into art. By midday, the longhouse smells less like stew and more like sweat, peat smoke and a wool, a kind of Viking cologne. Someone opens the door flap to let in fresh air, and the sudden blast of cold hits you like a slap from an ice god. But then, a man gestures toward a smaller hut beyond the main house, one that looks like it's breathing steam from its turf roof. You step outside, boots crunching on the snow, following him across the packed path. The wind is sharp, biting at your cheeks, but there's a curl of mist rising from that little building, like a ghost exhaling. You realise what it is only when the door opens and a wave of heat rushes out, thick and wet. A sauna. You blink, surprised. Vikings had saunas? Turns out, yes, they did. Archaeological finds in Scandinavia point to small bathhouses and steam huts used for both cleaning and warmth. You step inside and instantly your senses drown in heat. The air is heavy, damp, and smells of birch and smoke. Your skin prickles, pores opening in disbelief. Inside, the room glows with a soft amber hue. Flat stones line out a shallow pit, red hot from the fire beneath. Someone ladles water onto them, and the resulting steam wraps around you like a hot fog. You can barely see, but you can feel everything. The heat crawling up your spine, the hiss of steam against stone, the steady breathing of the others around you. It's glorious, and also kind of intense. You sit on a wooden bench, sweat already pulling at your collar. The man beside you grins and tosses a ladle full of water with theatrical flair. Steam explodes upward, and everyone laughs like they've done this 1,000 times. You realise they probably have. Historians still debate whether Viking bathhouses were communal or family-specific, but nearly every saga mentions bathing as a routine part of life. Once a week, sometimes more. Warmth and hygiene were not luxuries, they were rituals. The steam wasn't just for cleaning bodies, it cleaned souls, or at least soothed them after long frozen days. You breathe deeply and your lungs protest. The air is so hot it feels like swallowing soup. Your skin tingles. The sweat rolling down your neck feels like it's racing the steam itself. You think about all those old jokes about Vikings being savage and filthy, and suddenly they seem absurd. These people understood temperature therapy centuries before the term existed. Across the room, a woman dips a birch bundle into a bucket of water and starts lightly whipping her arms and legs with it. You stare, then realise it's deliberate. The birch branches stimulate circulation, help sweat flow, and release a scent that cuts through the smoke. You try it once, and yep, it stings. But then the blood rushes to your skin, and warmth blooms from the inside out. It's like rebooting your body in 900 AD. A few people are chatting softly in Old Norse, their words rising and falling with the rhythm of the steam. You can't understand them, but the tone is easy, joking. They might be gossiping, might be talking trade, might be reciting sagas. The air hums with camaraderie, sweat, and a kind of intimacy that's ancient and human. One man pours a ladle of cold water over his head, shouting something that's probably the Viking equivalent of "Woo!" You laugh despite yourself. Then someone motions for you to follow. You hesitate, but they insist. You step outside into the snow, still steaming like a boiled lobster. The cold slams into you, every nerve screaming, but instead of pain, it's exhilaration. You feel alive, absurdly, terrifyingly alive. You plunge your hands into the snow, rub it over your face and gasp. The contrast is electric. Heat, cold, breath, all blurring into something primal. You understand now why they did this. Not just to stay clean or warm, but to feel the edge of being human. You head back inside, shivering, only to feel the heat swallow you again. Your body buzzes, half in protest, half in gratitude. The others laugh, nodding approvingly. Congratulations! You've just taken part in a 1,000-year-old Scandinavian reset ritual. As the steam thickens again, someone starts humming a tune. Deep, slow, hypnotic. You close your eyes and listen, heartbeat syncing with the rhythm. You imagine centuries of winters, endless snow, frozen fjords, and these same songs filling the air, sung over the sound of steam and stone. Historians still debate how spiritual Viking bathing might have been. Some think it was purely practical, others argue it held symbolic meaning, purification before festivals, weddings, even the battle. Sitting here, sweat dripping, you suspect it was both. Clean body, clear spirit, warm heart. You glance at the bucket of water beside you and see bits of herbs floating on the surface. Juniper, maybe, or angelica root. The smell is bright, sharp. Vikings added herbs to their steam for medicinal purposes, clearing lungs, easing joints, healing skin. It's ancient aromatherapy with an attitude. You take a deep breath, and it feels like your insides are being ironed smooth. One of the women catches your eye and gestures toward your flushed face, laughing softly. You must look ridiculous, half melted, dazed and glistening like a roast chicken. You laugh back. It's hard to care about dignity when you're sweating like a candle. Eventually the steam fades, and people start to rise, stretching lazily. Someone opens the door, letting in a slice of blinding light and another rush of cold. It feels good now, refreshing, earned. You step out into the snow again, steam trailing from your skin like mist from a hot spring. Outside, the air smells different, cleaner, sharper. Your skin hums. The world seems brighter. You realise you're warm from the inside out. No cloak, no fire, just blood pumping and air biting. For the first time all night, you're not fighting the cold, you're dancing with it. You look back at the bathhouse, its little plume of steam curling into the pale sky, and it feels almost holy. Vikings didn't worship fire or water separately. They worshipped the balance between them, the same balance that kept them alive. You take one last deep breath of that icy air, your lungs full of heat and frost at once, and you grin. Somewhere in the distance a raven cries. The snow crunches beneath your boots as you turn toward the village again. Steam still rising from your skin like proof that warmth, for the Vikings, was never just survival, it was transformation. The cold bites sharper when you leave the bathhouse, but now your skin hums with defiance. You're warm, not because the world's any kinder, but because you've learned how to fight back. The air smells of salt and snow. The sea's somewhere close, its waves breaking against a frozen shore with a deep, rolling sigh. You pull your cloak tighter and start walking toward the edge of the settlement, where a group of Viking men are gearing up to head out. They're not going raiding today, too much ice for that, but even daily chores in this weather look like mini-quests for survival. You notice how they dress, layers upon layers, each one deliberate. Wool under linen, fur-lined cloaks, and thick leg wrappings bound with leather thongs. There's a rhythm to it, a ritual almost. Dressing for the cold wasn't fashion, it was tactics. One man gestures for you to follow as he steps into the open field, snow swirling around his boots. His cloak whips in the wind, pinned by a heavy brooch at the right shoulder. You realise something subtle. The pin isn't just decoration, it's strategy. Pinned on the right means the cloak wraps over the left, shielding his heart from the wind that almost always comes from the north. He grins at your confused expression and tugs the edge of your cloak to adjust it. You mimic his motion, and suddenly the wind stops finding its way down your neck. Genius. The Vikings turned even their clothing into engineering. You trudge after him through the snow, the wind testing every seam in your outfit. The fields are empty except for the occasional dark shape of livestock or a crow scavenging frozen scraps. The man ahead of you doesn't flinch. His stride is steady, cloak rippling behind him like a sail. You wonder what kind of mental strength it takes to treat this temperature as fine. Historians still debate how much Vikings understood about aerodynamics and clothing, but archaeological finds, pins, brooches and cloak fragments show a consistent pattern. They knew how to control airflow around the body, keeping warmth in and wind out. The trick wasn't just material, it was movement. You lift your arm experimentally and feel how your layers shift, trapping air but never letting it escape. You're basically wearing a woolen exoskeleton that breathes when you do. You laugh, realising these ancient northerners were doing technical outdoor apparel 1,000 years before anyone sold it at REI. The man gestures toward a ridge, where a few others are stacking logs and kindling. You blink, firewood? Out here? Turns out it's not for warmth, it's a beacon fire used to signal across distances or warn of storms. You help arrange the logs, and as you work you notice how the men keep moving constantly. No idle hands, no still bodies. Movement is part of the insulation strategy. A Viking who stops working starts freezing. When the beacon finally catches, a faint flame flaring in the daylight, the men cheer quietly. It's a small victory against the wind. The warmth from it doesn't reach far, but it doesn't have to. The point isn't comfort, it's control. You get the sense that to these people heat is a friend you can't keep, only borrow for a little while. You turn toward the sea and the landscape stretches endlessly. White snow, grey sky, black rock. Your breath fogs thickly as you walk closer to the waterline. There's a boat pulled onto the shore, covered in ice and canvas. 2 men are scraping frost from the hull with knives, their movements brisk, efficient. They wear mittens made from felted wool and lined with fur, tied at the wrist so snow can't sneak in. You glance at your own gloveless fingers and instantly regret your life choices. One of the men laughs when he sees you rubbing your hands. He picks up a handful of snow and tosses it at you. You flinch, then realise it doesn't melt instantly. It's so cold that even your body heat can't touch it yet. He says something that sounds like advice. The other man translates. Move. Always move. You start stomping your feet, swinging your arms, doing the world's least graceful Viking dance, but it works. Heat spreads through your limbs again. You grin like an idiot and the others grin back. For a brief, ridiculous moment, you're one of them. A human furnace in motion. The wind shifts, carrying a smell you didn't expect. Pine resin and something salty sweet. One of the men opens a pouch at his belt, offering you a sniff. It's pitch, resin mixed with animal fat. Used to waterproof cloaks, boots, even skin. You rub a bit between your fingers and realise it acts like a primitive balm, sealing moisture in. The Vikings had their own version of lotion, greasy, smoky but effective. Historians still debate whether warriors coated their faces with oils or fats before battle, both for intimidation and insulation. Some accounts claim they used bear grease, others say whale oil. Either way, it worked, and probably gave them a distinctive smell that said, yes, I'm terrifying and also well moisturised. You smear a bit on your cheeks, grimacing at the texture but laughing at the absurdity. You can almost hear yourself narrating this moment. Tonight on Viking spa treatments we exfoliate with frostbite. The men start walking back toward the longhouse and you follow, your cloak snapping in the wind like a flag. The cold's still brutal, but it feels less like an enemy now. You've learned to redirect it, like they did. Keep the layers right, keep moving, use the wind's own logic against it. On the way back, one of them points out the sky. Grey clouds streaking in from the north. A storm coming. You quicken your pace. By the time you reach the longhouse, flakes are already drifting down, soft but relentless. The man turns, taps his brooch and says something low. You can't catch the words, but you get the tone. Storm or no storm, we're ready. You step inside just as the first gust slams the door shut behind you. The room feels instantly warmer, the air heavy with smoke and laughter. Someone hands you a mug of warm mead and you sip it gratefully. The taste is sharp and golden, humming with life. You look around at these people, their clothes, their confidence, their easy dance with danger, and realise something. Warmth wasn't about comfort for them, it was proof of mastery. Proof they could bend nature just enough to live in it. As the storm roars outside, you pull your cloak closer and think about how fragile and fierce that balance really was. Wool, wind, willpower, that was their trinity. And somehow it worked. You take another sip of mead, your body still buzzing from the cold and the adrenaline. The longhouse shakes slightly under the wind, but you just smile, because now you know, warmth isn't just heat, it's defiance. By nightfall, the storm has calmed to a whisper, and the longhouse settles back into its rhythm, the steady hum of voices, the crackle of embers, the rustle of wool. You've learned enough by now to know that warmth here isn't something you chase during the day, it's something you build for the night. And that's when you notice the quiet procession of people preparing their beds. Not beds like yours, no mattresses, no sheets, no pillows fluffed with feathers. The Vikings built sleeping areas that doubled as miniature ecosystems of heat. Raised wooden platforms line the sides of the hall, each covered in layers. Straw for padding, wool blankets, animal skins, and sometimes entire hides from reindeer or bears. It looks crude, but when you sit down, it's surprisingly soft, like the earth itself lending you its warmth. You run your hand across a reindeer hide, tracing the soft fur. It's dense, warm, slightly oily from natural lanolin. Vikings didn't wash away that oil. It kept the fibres water-resistant and pliable. They treated warmth like a science, even if they didn't have the word for it. The hides were their climate tech, the bed their insulation chamber. A woman nearby is shaking out a wolf skin, the fur catching the firelight. You can see her layering technique. Hide fur side down first to trap heat, then another fur side up for comfort. Between them, dried moss and rushes, nature's version of a heated mattress pad. She looks up, grins at your curious stare, and gestures for you to help. You obey, clumsily patting down straw. She laughs softly, probably thinking you'd freeze in minutes without supervision. Historians still debate how Viking sleeping arrangements worked in detail. Some reconstructions suggest family units shared platforms, while others indicate assigned sleeping benches by rank or age. What's clear is that sleep wasn't solitary, it was survival through proximity. When you lie down, you instantly feel it, the magic of body heat multiplied. The fur traps it, the straw cushions it, and the walls of the longhouse hold it in. The air feels still here, heavy and warm. The faint smell of lanolin and wood smoke clings to everything. It's not perfume, but it smells like life. You shift slightly, and the hide creaks under your elbow. Someone next to you snorts in their sleep. Someone else adjusts the blankets. It's a living, breathing warmth. Messy, imperfect, human. The kind of warmth no radiator could ever mimic. A dog pads over and curls at your feet, sighing deeply. You grin, another layer of insulation. Vikings loved their dogs not just for hunting or guarding, but for warmth. Archaeological remains show dogs and cats buried beside their owners, often found near household sleeping areas. Companionship and comfort weren't luxuries, they were part of survival engineering. The wind outside howls briefly through the smoke vent, a reminder of the cold waiting just beyond. You pull your fur tighter. The hides are heavy but soft. Their weight settles your body like gravity itself has gone gentle for the night. Someone near the hearth stirs the coals again, tossing in a small piece of peat. The faint heat radiates outward, not enough to warm the whole hall, but enough to keep frost from creeping in. It's a delicate balance. Too much fuel and you waste resources, too little and the edges of the longhouse freeze. You can almost imagine the unspoken math in their heads. 2 peat blocks for comfort, 3 for survival. The firelight flickers against the low beams and shadows dance across the sleeping faces. You spot a man repairing a torn blanket with a bone needle, the motion calm and practiced. The thread glints faintly. It's not cotton or linen, but sinew. Strong, flexible, slightly waxy. You realise the Vikings even tailored their tools to resist the cold. The sinew won't stiffen like plant fibres. Every choice, every object here is born from necessity. You turn your head and catch sight of a small wooden chest near the far wall. A woman opens it and pulls out what looks like folded fabric. She shakes it out. A linen underlayer. Not for fashion, but for sleeping. Vikings often slept in shifts, keeping one layer close to the body while another dried by the hearth. You suddenly appreciate how exhausting managing warmth must have been. It wasn't just about surviving the day, it was about planning for the night. You shift again, finding your spot in the layered warmth. The dog stirs, pressing closer to your legs. The air grows thicker as everyone settles. The soundscape narrows to breathing, the faint crackle of embers, the soft whisper of wool shifting. Historians still debate whether the Vikings used separate coverings for individuals or shared communal blankets. Some burial finds show personal furs, others show combined bedding arrangements. The truth probably varied: family size, wealth, region. But lying here, it's hard to imagine choosing solitude over this communal comfort. Someone nearby murmurs half asleep, and you catch a fragment of Norse, something about the warmth of the hearth. You don't understand the words, but you understand the feeling. Every breath here is shared heat. Every sigh recycled air. You could almost measure love in degrees Celsius. Your mind wanders. You think about how your own bed back home, fluffy, electric, controlled by a button, suddenly seems sterile. Here, warmth isn't guaranteed. It's earned, and because it's earned, it feels alive. You run your fingers through the fur, the texture uneven but comforting. Somewhere outside, snow begins again, tapping faintly on the turf roof. The sound's rhythmic, almost like rain. The longhouse creaks in response, a slow, deep stretch, like an old creature shifting in its sleep. You close your eyes. The world shrinks to fur and breath and the heartbeat of the person beside you. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the land breathing too, the earth exhaling through the moss walls, whispering that it's okay to rest now. Historians still debate what dreams meant to Vikings, omens, visions, or just echoes of exhaustion. But if warmth has a dream, it must feel like this. The slow fade of cold from your bones, the shared silence of survival, the soft animal hum of life enduring. The fire pops once, sparks drifting upward like tiny stars. You don't move, you just breathe, letting the air settle over you like another blanket. You think vaguely that if the world ended tonight, you'd still be warm. By the next morning, the inside of the longhouse feels like a cocoon, stale with sleep but somehow still cozy. You stretch, the fur blanket sliding off your shoulders, and see the faint blue of dawn leaking through the smoke hole. People are already stirring, coughing softly, feeding coals, muttering about chores. You sit up and blink through the haze of half-warm air. Breakfast smells faintly of barley and smoke again. But what draws your attention this time isn't food. It's the quiet rhythm of a woman tending a strange little setup near the hearth. She's crouched over a clay pot buried halfway in ash. No flames lick its sides, yet the air around it shimmers with heat. You shuffle closer, curious, and realise you're looking at one of the Viking world's quieter miracles, fireless cooking. She sees your confusion and grins. With a pair of tongs, she lifts the lid, releasing a puff of steam and the smell of something deliciously meaty. The stew's still bubbling, no visible fire, just residual heat trapped in the coals and the stone surrounding it. You whistle softly, impressed. The woman chuckles, clearly understanding admiration when she hears it. This is how they stretched every ember. Cooking by retention. Hot stones from the night's fire were buried in ash or covered in peat, radiating steady warmth for hours. Food simmered slowly, conserving both fuel and effort. You dip a spoon in when she offers and taste it. Rich, earthy, slightly smoky. It's perfect. You're half convinced slow cooking is the Vikings' greatest invention after the longship. Nearby, a man's clearing out a smaller pit lined with stones. He scoops out the old ash, replacing it with new coals, then arranges flat rocks over the top. Soon he'll slide fish wrapped in leaves onto it, cover it with more stones, and let the residual heat do its magic. It's like an outdoor crock pot powered by yesterday's fire. Historians still debate how common this stone cooking was in daily Viking life. Some evidence suggests it was mostly used during travel, or when wood was scarce. But considering how little fuel these people wasted, it makes perfect sense. Every flicker of heat mattered. Even the ashes were recycled to dry boots, clean pots, or line walls for insulation. You notice a child scooping cooled ash into a wooden bowl, mixing it with water. You think he's playing until you realise he's making life a cleaning. Vikings turned yesterday's fire into today's soap. Efficiency wasn't a choice, it was a creed. You wander toward the hearth, watching how carefully it's managed. The hearth master, an older woman with their arms like carved wood, moves embers around like chess pieces. She keeps the centre glowing, the edges smouldering, adjusting airflow with stone slabs. There's no roaring blaze, just an organised living ember field. You've started to understand the Vikings didn't fight the cold with flames. They negotiated with it. The longhouse itself helps. Its low ceiling traps heat. The turf walls radiate stored warmth. Even the smoke plays a role. It curls upward, coating everything in a thin layer of soot that waterproofs the beams and slows rot. The smell of it clings to your hair, your clothes, your skin, like a badge of belonging. You sit beside a man shaping a small clay pot. His fingers move steadily, smoothing the sides, patching cracks with ash paste. You realise these pots have to survive direct contact with embers. He nods toward your cup of cooled mead and mimics setting it on the coals. You laugh nervously, shaking your head. He grins. The clay he's using has sand and crushed shell mixed in, an ancient heat-resistant blend. You wonder if modern engineers ever looked back this far for inspiration. The room hums with quiet energy. The air's smoky but breathable, the light dim but steady. Someone stirs the stew again. Another sharpens a knife, and a girl hums softly as she sweeps the floor with a bundle of dried grass. Each movement feels part of a larger rhythm, like the house itself is alive, fueled by routine. Outside, through the cracks in the door, snow glitters under pale sunlight. The longhouse feels like a beating heart inside a frozen body, every ember, every breath keeping life circulating. Historians still debate whether Vikings used chimneys in later centuries or stuck to open hearths. Early structures had none, meaning the smoke lingered deliberately. It warmed the rafters, preserved meat, and discouraged insects. Your modern lungs hate it, but your skin loves it. You're oddly aware of how moist the air feels, how your cheeks stay flushed even without direct fire. The heat is subtle, constant, a slow whisper instead of a shout. The old woman catches your eye and gestures to the pot again. You lean closer. Inside, chunks of meat roll gently in the simmering broth. Around it, smaller stones glow faintly. She uses one to warm her hands, then slides it under a wet wool cloth. Steam rises as the cloth dries. You realise she's using thermal transfer for laundry, not a single ember wasted. A kid nearby is poking a stick into the ash pit, clearly trying to get into trouble. His father scolds him sharply, pulling him away. You watch the man pour a handful of sand over the embers. It muffles the heat without extinguishing it completely. A subtle trick, banking warmth for later. You think about modern sustainability movements and grin. The Vikings invented that by necessity. The longer you sit here, the more you understand how warmth shaped everything they did. The house is less a shelter and more a living machine of heat management. People move through it with practiced efficiency, drying clothes near the hearth, heating food in coals, sleeping near stored stones. You're inside a system that wastes nothing, not even breath. Someone hands you a mug of warm broth, thick, salty, soothing. You drink slowly, feeling the heat spread through you. You close your eyes, letting the world narrow to sound, the clink of pottery, the hiss of steam, the occasional laugh. The longhouse creaks in the wind again, but it doesn't feel fragile. It feels indestructible, like it's part of the weather, not fighting it, but flowing with it. Historians still debate how much of Viking domestic life was communal versus individual, but here there's no separation. Fire, food, and warmth belong to everyone. You're not just fed, you're included. The woman across from you pours a ladleful of stew into a smaller bowl and sets it near the floor, where a cat immediately appears from nowhere, purring. You laugh softly. Even the animals are part of the system. Every living thing in this place has a role in generating or sharing heat. You lean back, cup in hand, the air thick with the scent of smoke and herbs. The world outside might be endless ice, but here there's equilibrium. A delicate, ancient balance between fire and frost, chaos and control. You realise suddenly that the phrase keeping warm doesn't really apply here. The Vikings didn't keep warmth. They cycled it. Through fire, through food, through fur, through flesh, they lived inside a loop perfectly tuned to their brutal climate. And somehow, sitting here, wrapped in smoke and wool, you start to envy them for it. By mid-morning, the clouds start to thin, and sunlight filters through the smoke hole like liquid gold. For the first time in days, the world outside the longhouse doesn't look entirely frozen to death. You step into the open air, pulling your cloak tight as a gust of wind greets you like an old rude friend. The snow has stopped, leaving behind a silent landscape of white and grey. But not all is ice. The earth beneath your boots gives a little, a sign of thaw, maybe just enough for work. A few villagers are already at it. Some patch the turf roof, others haul bundles of moss and soil. You're handed a crude wooden shovel before you can even protest. Guess it's your turn to help. The woman leading the repair crew gestures for you to climb up onto the longhouse roof. You look at her, then at the ladder, a few slippery logs lashed together, and consider your life choices. But up you go, boots crunching against layers of frozen moss. The roof feels springy underfoot, not solid like wood or tile. It's turf, living earth stacked thick over birch bark and timber beams. Every clump of moss and grass is part of the insulation. It's soft, damp, alive. You suddenly realise this roof is less architecture and more biology. The woman hands you a chunk of sod and points to a bare patch. You press it into the place, tamping it down with your palm. The smell rises, wet soil and green life. She nods approvingly, muttering something that probably means, "Not bad for someone who looks like they'd freeze in April." You grin and keep working. It hits you then, this turf roof isn't just about keeping the cold out. It's about using the earth itself as armour. The layers trap air and moisture, regulating temperature. In winter, it keeps the heat in. In summer, it keeps it out. A perfect self-repairing blanket of dirt. Historians still debate whether all Viking homes used turf or if it was mainly for northern regions, but the logic is too good to ignore. You scrape at a patch of old frost, revealing the moss beneath. It's surprisingly green, even after months of snow. Beneath it, roots knit the soil together like stitches. The woman beside you smirks and says something while pointing at the greenery. You don't understand the words, but the pride in her tone is clear. Our roof is alive. A man below is filling cracks in the wall with mud mixed with straw. He pats it smooth with the palm of his hand, then presses moss into the gaps for extra sealing. The longhouse is breathing again, patching itself like an animal tending to wounds. You look at the walls up close and realise how thick they are. Layer after layer of wood, earth, grass, even seaweed in some spots. Each material doing its part to trap warmth. You glance toward the smaller huts scattered nearby, sheds, storehouses, maybe even an outhouse. Their roofs sag under snow, but they're built the same way, turf and timber blending perfectly into the landscape. See, you step back and realise how invisible these homes are from a distance. They belong here, as if the land itself grew them. Historians still debate whether Viking turf houses evolved from Celtic or Norse innovations, but their endurance speaks for itself. Some turf houses in Iceland still stand after centuries, their walls grown thick with time. You run your hand along the roof's edge and feel its warmth, faint but real. Even frozen soil remembers the sun. Someone shouts from below and waves you over. You climb down carefully, slipping only once. You pretend it was on purpose. The man who called is standing by a pit lined with stones. It looks like a small dugout, half covered with branches. He beckons you closer, pulling aside the cover to reveal snow. Piles of it, clean and packed tight. You blink, confused. Why keep snow inside a shelter? He grins and dips a wooden cup into it, then hands it to you. The snow's melting, turning to cold water. It hits you. You're standing in a Viking refrigerator. They used pits like these to preserve meat, butter, even fish. In summer, they'd refill them with stored ice from winter. The same ground that insulated warmth could also store cold. It's environmental judo, letting nature work both ways. The man gestures to the pit's walls, lined with turf and straw. Warm keeps cold, he says in thickly accented English, maybe guessing your thoughts. You laugh, nodding. Cold keeps warm, you reply. He claps your shoulder and grins. You're starting to speak the same language after all, physics. You walk around the back of the longhouse and find another surprise. A low structure half buried in a hill. Its doorway faces away from the wind, and smoke drifts lazily from a vent pipe. A turf-walled workshop, maybe a forge. Inside it's warm, but not from fire. The walls radiate a steady heat that feels almost like central heating. Then you notice why. The forge inside shares a wall with the longhouse, its warmth bleeding through. They built this entire settlement like a circulatory system. Heat travels through shared walls, underground pits, even the earth itself. Nothing wasted, nothing isolated. You start to see it like a map in your head, a network of heat nodes, every room connected, every ember accounted for. The Vikings weren't just surviving winter, they were engineering it. Historians still debate the extent of Viking building sophistication, whether they intentionally used geothermal spots or simply built with local intuition. But you can feel the intelligence in every beam and sod patch. It's trial and error turned into instinct. A gust of wind cuts through the clearing, sharp and sudden, but you barely flinch this time. The woman repairing the roof glances at you and nods. Good, she says simply. You smile, cheeks numb but spirit warm. You get it now, warmth isn't something you sit and wait for, it's something you earn with your hands. Back inside the longhouse you feel the difference immediately. The air's richer, heavier, almost humid. The repaired roof has tightened the seal, trapping the warmth. Someone tosses more moss onto a drying rack near the fire. It'll be used for bedding and insulation later. Even their trash has a purpose. You find a quiet corner and sit, letting your fingers thaw. Outside, the wind howls across the fjord, but here the sound is muffled, absorbed by the walls thick with earth and grass. You sip from a cup of warm broth, the heat radiating from your chest outward. You close your eyes and imagine the centuries of winters that have passed like this. Men and women layering, patching, cooking, breathing, always negotiating with the cold. And you realise something profound. Vikings didn't keep the elements out. They built themselves into them. Their warmth came not from dominance over nature, but from harmony with it. The turf walls, the snow pits, the breathing roofs, they all said the same thing. You don't fight the cold, you live with it, and let it teach you how to last. You take one last sip, the steam curling upward, blurring the line between smoke and breath. The air tastes of ash and moss and something like wisdom. Outside, the snow resumes, soft, slow, endless. But inside, the longhouse glows, alive as ever. The next morning, the world beyond the fjord feels impossibly wide. You wake to the sound of gulls and the rhythmic slap of water against wood. The snow has eased into a mist, and the air tastes like salt instead of frost. Down by the shore, the Vikings are already loading a small trading vessel. bundles of fur, wool, and carved trinkets stacked neatly beside barrels sealed with pitch. The storm might have kept them in for a while, but trade waits for no one, not even winter. You follow them, boots crunching on frost-hardened sand, watching how they move with effortless rhythm. Each man knows his role, each bundle its place. You realise something as you help tie down a crate of furs. Warmth isn't just a domestic art here, it's an export. The Vikings traded warmth as currency: sheepskins, walrus hides, sealskin boots, cloaks woven tight as secrets. Every item is survival packed for travel. One of the traders, a tall man with a beard that could have its own zip code, slaps your shoulder and says something that sounds like, "Cold makes gold." You grin, even if it's not literal, it feels true. In a land of scarcity, warmth was wealth. They finish loading and push the ship toward the water. The hull creaks, then slides into the grey waves with a sigh. The air smells of tar and brine and adventure. Someone shouts, and the sail unfurls, a patchwork of wool and hide, thickened with animal fat to repel water. You squint at it, realising it's not just a sail, it's a shield against the cold wind. Historians still debate how Viking sails were made waterproof. Some would argue they soaked them in fish oil, others say animal fat or even milk curd mixed with lime. Whatever the secret, it worked. You can see droplets bead off the surface as wind fills the fabric, snapping it taut. The sound is deep and satisfying, a thunderclap of momentum. You climb aboard as the ship drifts away from shore. The cold bites instantly, sharper than ever on open water, but everyone else seems unfazed. They pull their hoods tight, tuck fur mittens into their belts, and get to work. You mimic them, tugging your cloak close. The deck is slick, the air electric. You think of home's static buzz, and realise this is its ancient ancestor. The sea wind stings, but the motion warms you. The Vikings row in steady rhythm, switching to sail when the gust picks up. Each man's cloak flares like a wave. The sound of oars cutting through the icy water is hypnotic. Steady, patient, endless. You breathe deep, feeling the salt burn your lungs. A woman on board, clearly more experienced than you, adjusts your cloak again. She tucks the edge beneath your belt, explaining with gestures. Keep air trapped, stop drafts. You nod. She laughs softly, probably thinking you'd last 5 minutes in Greenland. She's not wrong. They open one of the crates to check the furs inside. The pelts gleam. Fox, mink, and even beaver. Each one soft, dense, and practically alive with trapped heat. These aren't luxuries. They're fuel for other civilizations. Warmth as trade, warmth as diplomacy. The Vikings brought it south to the Franks and east to the Rus, spreading not just goods but technology. How to weave, how to tan, how to endure. Historians still debate how far these trade routes stretched in winter months. Some argue they paused until thaw, but artefacts found deep inland, fur-lined boots, wool cloaks, suggest otherwise. Vikings didn't wait for good weather, they adapted to bad weather better than anyone else. The ship crests a wave, and cold spray slaps your face. It's shockingly sharp, but somehow you laugh. You've learned to respect this kind of cold. It's honest, it doesn't hide what it wants. The others laugh with you, slapping your back, calling you ice friend, or something close. They unwrap bundles of dried fish and pass them around, followed by horns of mead. You sip gratefully, the liquid warmth burning down to your stomach. The boat rocks, but no one minds. These people trust the sea like it's a living being they've struck a truce with. Dangerous, but necessary. You glance toward the horizon. The water glitters like broken glass under a sun that barely clears the mountains. You can see in the distance another sail, maybe another trading crew or perhaps something less friendly. Either way, nobody looks nervous. The Vikings learned long ago that the cold kills slower than hesitation. One of the men sits beside you, holding out a piece of fur. He gestures, miming sewing, then points at your hood. You get it. He's offering to reinforce it with fur trim. You hand it over, watching as he stitches quickly with a bone needle, humming under his breath. In minutes, the job's done. You pull it back on and instantly feel the difference. The edge of the hood traps warm air against your face. You murmur thanks, and he nods like it's nothing. But it's not nothing. It's centuries of design, knowledge passed from hands to hands. The sea grows choppier as the wind shifts, colder now. You see frost forming along the edges of the ship, white lace clinging to the rails. The helmsman spits into his palm and rubs it on the wood, a superstition maybe, or habit. He glances at you and says, "Wood cold, man colder," then grins. You grin back, even if your teeth chatter. You glance down at the deck, where bits of ice glisten in the cracks. The men ignore it. The constant motion keeps them warm, and their boots, stuffed with straw and wool, stay dry. You remember the earlier lesson. Stillness is the enemy. You stamp your feet a little, earning an approving nod. Move, one says. Always move. A few hours pass like that, rowing, laughing, the occasional splash of seawater finding your face. Despite the freezing air, your body stays warm. The rhythm of the work, the friction of wool, the steady burn of mead, all of it combines into a balance that feels ancient, perfect, almost mathematical. Historians still debate whether Viking sailors used special techniques to stay warm at sea. Some suggest seal oil cloaks, others swear by layered tunics woven extra tight. But you can feel the truth in motion. Warmth here comes not from what you wear, but how you live. Keep moving, keep trading, keep breathing against the wind. When the ship finally docks again, the sun's sinking. The world turned to silver. The men offload their cargo, laughter echoing across the frozen dock. You jump down after them, your legs wobbly, but your spirit oddly light. The cold doesn't feel like punishment anymore, it feels like partnership. As the last crate of furs disappears into the longhouse, the bearded trader from earlier catches your eye. He tosses you a fox pelt, its fur shining amber in the dusk. "For warmth," he says simply. You nod, holding it close, the heat from his hand still lingering in the fur. You look out toward the sea one last time, the horizon's fading into mist, the ship a dark silhouette against the dying light. You realise warmth for the Vikings wasn't about staying still, it was about motions, exchange and memory. They didn't hoard heat, they shared it, sold it, sailed it across the world. You tuck the pelt around your shoulders and turn back toward the glowing longhouse, smoke curling into the twilight. Inside, you know, the hearth will still be glowing, the air thick with wool and mead and laughter. And you think, yeah, they understood warmth better than any of us ever will. By the time you return from the harbour, night has settled again. One of those deep, endless Viking nights that feels like the sky's been stretched too long and forgotten how to lift. The air is still, cold enough to crack wood, and the stars burn sharp and close, like someone's thrown salt across the dark. You follow the faint glow of torches toward a gathering near the edge of the village. The longhouse you left behind hums softly with life, but this gathering feels different. Slower, quieter, reverent. You realise it's a ritual night. In the heart of the settlement, a ring of stones encircles a small raised platform. No bonfire roars here, no blaze cutting through the dark. Instead, there's a shallow pit lined with glowing coals, their heat flickering low and steady. The people stand close, cloaked and still. A hush falls over them that even the wind respects. You join the outer edge of the circle, the warmth from the pit barely reaching your boots. A tall woman steps forward, maybe a priestess, or maybe just the keeper of the night. Her cloak is trimmed with white fur, gleaming in the starlight. She carries a bowl filled with something that steams faintly, an offering maybe. She begins to speak, her voice low and rhythmic. You can't make out every word, but the sound itself feels older than language. Around her, faces glow in the red light of the embers, eyes shining, cheeks flushed with cold and faith. A few people close their eyes, lips moving with hers. And then she lifts her hand toward the sky. The entire crowd follows, palms open, reaching toward the faint shimmer of the northern lights wavering above. Green and purple ribbons stretch across the darkness, dancing silently. You feel it. The awe, the smallness, the sense that warmth isn't just survival anymore. It's something holy. Historians still debate what Vikings actually believed about the northern lights. Some said they were reflections from the armour of the Valkyries. Others thought them fires of the gods. But standing here, you realise they're also a promise. The sky itself burning just enough to remind you that even the frozen heavens hold heat somewhere. The woman sets the bowl on the stones and pours its contents into the coals. Steam bursts upward, carrying the scent of herbs and fat. The air thickens with warmth for just a moment before fading again. It's a symbolic act, you can feel it. A gift to the gods of frost and fire both. The balance between them is life itself. The people begin to hum, a low, wordless sound that grows slowly, like breath building under ice. You join without thinking, your voice trembling at first, then finding the rhythm. It's not music in the modern sense, but vibration, a shared pulse. The heat of the coals flickers with each breath as if the earth is answering back. Someone hands you a small piece of bread dipped in honey. You eat it, the sweetness in your ears grounding you. Another offers you a sip from a horn. It's warm mead spiced with something earthy. The heat from it slides down your throat, pooling in your chest. You realise this is warmth in its purest form, communal, spiritual, fleeting. The woman's voice rises again. This time sharper, calling out names that sound like gods. Freya, Thor, maybe Odin. The people answer with murmurs. You can't tell if it's prayer, gratitude, or negotiation. Maybe all three. When she finishes, she lowers her hands and lets the silence fall. The fire crackles once as if in response. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a man steps forward. His face is lined, his beard streaked with grey. He carries a small torch, its flame trembling in the cold. He kneels by the coals and touches the torch to them. The ember flares, catching the flame. A murmur ripples through the people, relief, approval. This small light will be carried back to the longhouse, a literal spark of the ritual's blessing. Historians still debate whether Viking rituals of warmth, Yule feasts, solstice fires were truly irreligious or simply seasonal. But standing here, you feel the blur between need and reverence. In a world this harsh, keeping a flame alive is an act of faith. As the ceremony winds down, the people begin to disperse. The woman gathers the remaining coals into a clay bowl, covering it with moss and ash. You watch as she carries it away carefully, like a newborn. Those embers will light the next day's hearths, ensuring the flame never dies. You stay for a moment longer, alone near the pit. The coals glow faintly, their light soft against the snow. You crouch, holding your hands over them. The heat's gentle now, barely there, but it feels personal, like the fire's acknowledging your presence. You think about all the nights like this before you, countless winters, countless hands doing the same thing, keeping the same fragile warmth alive. You whisper something to the coals, not a prayer exactly, just gratitude. For heat, for endurance, for the way life finds ways to glow even in darkness. The stars shimmer overhead, cold and eternal, but you don't feel small anymore. You feel connected to the land, to the people around you, to every creature that's ever huddled close to another for heat. Maybe that's the real religion here. Not gods or myths, but the shared faith that the fire will always return. You rise, brushing snow from your cloak. The village glows softly ahead. Small windows flickering, smoke drifting upward. As you walk back, your breath mingles with the mist from the houses. It looks like the earth itself is exhaling, warm and alive. At the doorway of the longhouse, someone opens the flap and holds it for you. The familiar scent of smoke and wool greets you like an old friend. Inside, the new flame from the ritual burns bright, its light dancing across faces weary but content. You sit by the fire, hands outstretched, feeling its pulse match your own. The woman with the white fur cloak passes by, catches your eye and nods. You nod back. No words needed. The lesson's clear. Warmth is sacred, but not because it's rare, because it's shared. Later that same night, after the ritual flame has found its home inside the longhouse hearth, the atmosphere changes. The solemn quiet of prayer gives way to laughter, the kind of laughter that shakes the walls a little, that feels like rebellion against the cold. Someone brings out a drum, someone else claps in rhythm, a jug of mead passes hand to hand, and soon the whole place hums like a warm, drunken heartbeat. You're sitting near the fire again, the heat painting your face amber. The coals crackle like applause for surviving another day. Beside you, a man is trying to teach two children how to carve a piece of driftwood into a comb, though the kids are more interested in poking the ashes with sticks. Across the room, a woman leans against a pile of furs, laughing so hard she can barely breathe. The sound is contagious. The whole longhouse feels lighter. It's a feast, though not a grand one. No overflowing tables or roasted oxen, just bowls of stew, chunks of bread, and enough ale to loosen tongues. A pot of something sweet simmers on the coals. Honey. maybe mixed with berries. You dip your finger in when no one's looking. It tastes like fire and sunlight bottled together. This is warmth of another kind, not the physical, not even the spiritual, but emotional. It's laughter melting frost from the soul. You realise that after days of battling cold and dark, these nights are their truest defence, a human shield made of joy. A man near the hearth starts a stew, his voice deep and gravelly. Everyone quiets. He gestures broadly, his hands carving shapes in the smoky air. You catch bits of it. Something about Thor losing his hammer, a giant, a goat that explodes. You can't follow every word, but his delivery is perfect. Dramatic, full of pauses and wide-eyed humour. The crowd roars with laughter. Historians still debate whether Viking storytelling was mostly entertainment or sacred tradition, but in this moment it's clearly both. The tale warms the room better than the fire. Each laugh adds heat, each gasp draws people closer together. The longhouse glows brighter, though the fire itself hasn't changed at all. You sip mead, feeling it buzz through your blood like liquid courage. Your body's warm, your cheeks flushed, your shoulders relaxed. It's easy to forget for a little while how fragile all this is, how close the cold always waits. The laughter keeps it at bay, one heartbeat at a time. A woman beside you notices your faraway look. She nudges you with her elbow, then tosses a fur blanket over your lap. You smile your thanks. She shrugs as if to say, "Don't mention it. It's what we do." Her gesture feels small, but it lands heavy with meaning. Here, warmth is shared instinctively. No one asks. No one hoards. You watch as a pair of men begin a mock wrestling match, rolling across the floor to cheers and jeers. The dog joins in, barking with unearned confidence. You can't help but laugh, the sound spilling out easily, freely. It feels like being part of something ancient, older than language, older than culture. The joy of being alive, together, and not freezing. Historians still debate the social function of Viking feasts. Were they just celebrations or also political performances? But here, they're survival psychology in action. After days of silence, hunger, and fear, laughter resets the body. It reminds you why you keep fighting for warmth at all. As the night deepens, the songs start. Low at first, then louder. Someone beats a rhythm on the table. Others clap, stamping their feet. The melody is strange to modern ears. Half chant, half heartbeat. You find yourself swaying, then joining in. You don't know the words, but the rhythm's easy to learn. The heat builds not from the fire, but from movement, breath, sound. The air thickens, smoky and sweet. You notice faces glistening with sweat, hair damp at the temples. The longhouse becomes a living furnace of music and motion. One of the elders, the same man who lit the ritual torch earlier, leans toward you and shouts over the noise, "Cold outside, warm hearts inside!" Then he bursts out laughing, spraying a bit of mead in the process. You laugh so hard your ribs hurt. The stories keep flowing, switching between ridiculous and profound. A woman tells of a fisherman who swore he caught a mermaid, only to realise it was a seal, and that the seal cursed him into catching nothing but seaweed for a year. The whole hall howls. You notice that every tale, no matter how wild, ends the same way, with people laughing, not crying. Tragedy always bends toward humour here, like the way a flame bends toward air. Then, between songs, a hush falls again. Not solemn this time, but soft. People start curling up against one another, laughter fading into yawns. Someone covers the embers, leaving just enough glow for comfort. A few linger by the fire, telling smaller, quieter stories. One is about a woman who carried a burning coal in her hand all night to light her family's hearth the next morning. You listen closely, realising it's not just a story, it's a parable. Heat handed from one to another, never dying. You glance around. The crowd that was laughing minutes ago now rests in gentle piles of fur and wool. Children lean on parents, dogs sprawl across feet. The fire pops softly, the smoke curling upward like a lullaby. You're half drunk, half dreaming, and wholly content. You think about how warmth here is always plural. Never my fire, never your blanket. Always our hearth, our story, our night. In a place where the cold can kill in hours, selfishness doesn't survive long. Only generosity does. Historians still debate whether Viking hospitality was genuine altruism or cultural expectation. But sitting here, surrounded by shared heat and easy laughter, it feels less like custom and more like instinct. The simple recognition that no one stays warm alone. The last ember shifts, glowing deep red. Someone mutters a good night, then another. Soon the longhouse is quiet again, save for the faint snoring of warriors and the distant whisper of wind against turf. You pull the shared blanket closer, the wool rough but comforting. You smile into the darkness, thinking about the laughter still echoing faintly in the rafters. It's the sound of defiance, of life choosing itself. And as you drift towards sleep, the thought lingers. Maybe that's the warmest thing about being human. You wake to darkness again, though it is hard to say if it's morning or midnight. This far north, the difference blurs. The air inside the longhouse feels thicker than before, heavy with sleep and smoke. You can hear slow breathing all around you, punctuated by a soft snore, a shifting fur, the occasional creak of wood. Outside, the wind has gone quiet, as if the whole world has paused to listen. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the others. The fire has burned down to embers, faint orange eyes winking in the dark. You feed it a handful of twigs from the pile near the hearth and blow gently. The coals glow brighter, enough to paint the walls in a soft red pulse. It's strange how the smallest spark feels enormous in this silence. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and step toward the door. The flap of wool pushes open easily, letting in a rush of cold that bites your face and fingers. The world outside is still. The snow gleams faintly under starlight, and frost clings to everything like glass. You exhale, and your breath curls upward, the only movement in an otherwise frozen painting. The longhouse behind you glows faintly through the cracks, a single ember of civilization against a sea of black. You start walking, boots crunching softly in the snow. The cold wraps around you, familiar now, almost companionable. You've learned its rhythm, how it tests, how it forgives. You reach a small rise overlooking the fjord. Below, the water lies still, a mirror of stars. You can almost see your reflection between them, small, bundled, insignificant but alive. The sky above looks endless, scattered with constellations that the Vikings once navigated by. You remember how they read warmth not just in fire, but in starlight, in wind direction, in the breath of animals. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howls, low and long, echoing through the valley. You freeze for a moment, not in fear but awe. That sound is the heartbeat of this place. You realise the Vikings must have known it well, sitting awake on nights like this, listening for the song of the wild. Historians still debate whether the Norse viewed wolves as symbols of death or strength, but either way, they respected them. The wolf, the ice, the night, they were never enemies, just constants in a shared existence. The cold wasn't something to defeat, but to outlast. You head back toward the longhouse, brushing frost from your cloak. The door creaks softly as you push inside. The air hits you like a sigh. Warm, smoky, full of life again. You can see a few people already awake, feeding the fire. Their faces drowsy but content. One man nods as you enter. "Cold night," he says, voice rough as gravel. You grin. "Always." He chuckles, tossing another peat block onto the embers. The smell of burning earth fills the air, deep and sweet. You watch as the orange light spreads, climbing the walls, making the shadows retreat. The longhouse breathes again. A few others stir, rubbing eyes, pulling on cloaks. The first murmurs of conversation ripple through the space. Plans for the day, talk of the weather, maybe gossip about who snored the loudest. It's mundane, but it's life. You help move a few stones closer to the hearth, warming them for later. The woman who keeps the fire nods approvingly. "For the watch," she says. You tilt your head. "Watch." She points outside toward the ridge, where a small tower of stacked wood stands, an outpost, a sentinel. Someone must always keep vigil through the night. In a world this cold, vigilance is as vital as flame. You volunteer before you can think twice. A few minutes later, you're trudging up the hill carrying one of the heated stones wrapped in cloth. The sky above has paled slightly, the faintest hint of dawn behind the mountains. You settle into a small shelter beside the beacon fire. The stone radiates warmth through your gloves, your personal piece of hearth light. The valley below is Sels. The settlement lies still, smoke drifting lazily from its roofs. You can see the fjord beyond, where ice breaks slowly, pieces shifting and glinting in the growing light. Everything moves at the pace of breathing, slow, steady, eternal. Historians still debate what the watch meant for Vikings in times of peace. Was it defence, ritual, or discipline? Sitting here, you suspect it's all three. Watching the horizon isn't just about danger, it's about remembering how small you are and how much depends on vigilance. You wrap your hands around the hot stone again, the heat seeping into your skin. The contrast between cold air and warm palm feels sharper now, almost sacred. You realise how much of Viking life revolves around contrasts like this. Dark and light, fire and ice, solitude and community. Their survival depended on balance. The sun creeps over the ridge, weak and golden. The light doesn't warm much, but it glows with promise. You exhale, and your breath glitters in the beam. Below, smoke rises from the longhouse again, steady and calm. The day begins. You think back on everything you've seen, the wool, the fur, the steaming baths, the stone hearths, the laughter, the prayers. Every trick and habit, every bit of wisdom woven into their days. The Vikings didn't conquer the cold with invention. They befriended it with routine. You stand, stretch, and look one last time at the horizon. The fjord sparkles, the mountains blush under dawn. The cold presses in, sharp but honest. You smile into it, whispering to the wind like an old friend. You win today, but only a little. You head down the hill, warmth tucked under your cloak like a secret. The longhouse doors open as you approach, golden light spilling out to meet you. Someone calls your name, not your real one, but something close enough, a nickname born from shared nights and shared fires. You grin, step inside, and let the door close on the freezing world behind you. Inside, the fire roars again. Someone passes you a cup of broth and you take it, hands trembling slightly from the cold. The taste is simple but perfect. You settle by the hearth, leaning back against the wall, feeling the heat soak through layers of wool and fur and skin. The world outside is still frozen, but you no longer mind. You've learned the rhythm, the dance between endurance and ease. The Vikings didn't survive because they feared the cold. They survived because they listened to it. And now, so have you. By the time the next dawn edges across the fjord, the world has softened. The longhouse roof drips in steady rhythms, each drop carving a path through the crusted snow. You wake to the faint sound of water sliding off eaves, and for a second you can hardly believe it. Thaw. The air smells different, lighter, the sharp metallic bite of winter giving way to something almost sweet. You stretch under the firs, your limbs aching in that good used way, the kind that says, you've worked, you've lived, you've earned your warmth. Around you people stir slowly. A child yawns so wide it squeaks, someone nearby laughs softly. Even the animals seem lazier today, their breathing calm and steady. When you push open the door, the cold still greets you, but it's changed. It no longer cuts, it brushes. The snow crunches less, the ground underneath feels softer. A mist rises from the earth where ice has started to loosen its grip. You step into it and breathe deep, tasting renewal. For the first time in what feels like forever, the wind doesn't burn your cheeks, it caresses them. A few villagers are already outside, faces lifted to the pale sunlight like worshippers. One man runs his hand along the turf wall of the longhouse, smiling as if checking on an old friend. Meltwater trickles down between the moss seams, glinting like silver veins. The woman who taught you to layer hides waves from the roof, laughing as she wrings out a bundle of wet moss. "Warm now," she calls down. You grin. The longhouse looks alive again, steam rising from its roof, smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. You can hear laughter from inside, faint music from a bone flute. The harsh rhythm of winter has eased into something gentle, almost musical. You walk toward the edge of the settlement, boots sinking into damp snow. The fjord stretches ahead, no longer a mirror of ice but a slow breathing surface. The water moves again, rippling under the light breeze. In the distance, gulls circle, and somewhere you can just make out the creak of a boat being repaired. Life reclaims its sound. You crouch near the shore and scoop a handful of snowmelt, cold and clean. You sip it, the chill shocking but invigorating. It's strange how something so cold can remind you of warmth. But maybe that's the point. The Vikings never separated the two. They were halves of the same story. Historians still debate whether Vikings celebrated the exact moment of thaw, but traces of rituals mark it. The blot festivals, offerings to Freya for the return of fertility and sunlight. You can imagine it, a night like this one, when the long freeze breaks, and people gather to thank the earth for surviving alongside them. You turn back toward the village. watching the light shift over the roofs. The dogs chase one another through slush. Kids fling chunks of melting snow and shriek with laughter. Adults mend nets, sharpen tools, patch sails. The air buzzes with the quiet excitement of renewal. Inside the longhouse, the fire burns smaller now, the smoke clearer. Someone has cracked open a side window to let in fresh air. You can hear the faint trickle of melting ice dripping through the vent hole above. The smell of peat and wool still lingers, but underneath it is something new. Wet soil, green roots, possibility. You sit by the hearth, watching the flames dance lower, slower. The woman who guards the fire catches your eye and smiles. She dips a stick into the coals and stirs gently, as if to remind the flame that its work isn't done yet. You realise how much she and the fire have in common. Constant, quiet, indispensable. Around you voices rise and fall, soft and calm. Someone hums a tune you recognise from the feast, now slower, gentler, almost a lullaby. A man passes by handing you a carved wooden comb. "For luck," he says, then adds with a grin, "and for hair." You laugh, turning it in your hand, the wood's warm from his touch. Outside, the light grows stronger, gold bleeding through the smoke hole above. You can feel it on your face, faint but real. The fire's heat, the sun's warmth, the crowd's breath, they blend together until it's impossible to tell which is which. You realise this is the end of winter's lesson. Warmth isn't a thing you own. It's something you make, again and again, out of whatever the world gives you. Stone, fur, steam. Laughter, love, it's all heat in different disguises. You close your eyes, leaning back against the wall. The sounds around you blur. Voices, fire, wind, water. Everything slows. For the first time since this journey began, you feel complete. Not because you found comfort, but because you earned it. You think of all you've seen. Wool cloaks pinned against the wind. Bodies huddled under hides. Snids glowing in the dark. Coals kept alive through faith. Every act, no matter how small, was resistance. Soft, steady defiance against a world built to freeze you. Historians still debate 1,000 details of Viking life, but sitting here, you know the truth they all circle around. Survival isn't about strength. It's about warmth, and warmth is something you share. You look around the hall one last time, memorising it. The glowing coals, the quiet smiles, the breath rising like mist into the beams. Then you breathe out slowly, letting the air carry the weight of the cold away. Outside, the sun lifts higher. The ice breaks louder. The earth exhales steam. You smile, because here at the edge of the thaw you understand the real secret. Fire may fade, but warmth endures. It lingers in wool and laughter, in faith and memory, in every breath taken beside another. You pull your cloak close, feeling the last pulse of the hearth against your back. The sound of dripping water fills the silence like applause for the living. And in that still moment, as the world softens from white to gold, you whisper to yourself, almost a lullaby, "You're warm now? You made it through." The light fades slowly over the fjord, the air now soft with the scent of wet earth and smoke. The longhouse glows like an ember in the dusk, its walls breathing, its roof steaming faintly under the tender warmth of spring. You sit by the door one last time, watching the fire settle into its steady heartbeat. The sounds are slower now, the crackle of wood, the sigh of a distant wave, the rhythmic drip of thawing snow. Everything feels suspended, gentle. The cold hasn't vanished, it lingers at the edges, patient, waiting, but it no longer frightens you. You've learned its rules, danced its rhythm, found beauty in its moments. The Vikings knew this truth better than anyone. Warmth isn't the opposite of cold, it's the song that rises from surviving it. You think of the hands that fed the coals, the laughter that chased frost from the rafters, the stories told until the fire burned low. You think of how, in this world of endless dark, light was never just a thing, it was a choice. So you breathe in deeply, the air thick with smoke and memory, and as the wind brushes through the turf walls, you almost hear it whisper back, "You kept the fire." Outside, the last of the snow melts into the soil, sinking deep, ready to begin again. Inside, the hearth glows steady, small but unyielding, the perfect echo of a heart refusing to stop. You smile, closing your eyes as the final warmth spreads through you like a story coming home. And somewhere far off under the quiet hum of stars the fire still burns.